So today we talk about the EUDR, and then my first introduction here now will be a short introduction to the EUDR study of tropical deforestation and linkages to Finland. Let's then see next slide. So just before, maybe Tiitu, you can put the agenda one more time to the chat, because that was my first slide in the presentation, and now we moved already forward. So those who are joining now, they can see the agenda in the website if you share the link in the chat. So today we talk about this EU Deforestation Regulation, and in very short, many of you are already familiar what it is. But just shortly, this is the regulation that aims to tackle global deforestation and forest degradation, which is driven by EU consumption, including Finnish consumption. And it entered into force last June, and is coming now applicable as of 30th of December this year, and for the micro and small enterprises a little bit later. And it sets mandatory due diligence requirements for companies specifically who place commodities or products on the EU market or export them from the EU market. So this is for the companies. And the cutoff date, which means the cutoff date for the deforestation and degradation, is 31st of December 2020. So it's expected that after that, it is not allowed any deforestation or degradation. And this applies to commodities: soy, beef, palm oil, wood, cacao, coffee, and rubber, and some products which are derived from these, such as leather. So this is, in short, the EU Deforestation Regulation. You will hear more about it today in different presentations, and feel free to ask also any specific questions, because we have some experts also joining this call today who can then give you answers, as also those who are not presenting themselves. And here is a map of the global deforestation and conversion hotspots, which are the areas where most of the deforestation takes place. So these are focused, of course, in the tropical regions in the world, in the Amazon region and around and south from the Amazon region in South America, also a little bit in Central America, then Central Africa, a little bit to West Africa and East Africa, then in Southeast Asia. So these are the areas where most of the deforestation in the tropics happens. And if we have some data about the primary tropical deforestation, now these are from 2022, and the new data is coming hopefully somewhere in the middle of this year regarding the last year. But the tropical primary forest loss was still over 4 million hectares, and it was even increased from the previous years. So there is still extensive deforestation taking place, and it causes a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions, and this is estimated that this 4 million hectares around the annual emissions of India, which is the third largest emitter in the world. Deforestation is still highest in Brazil, and main reasons is the large-scale cattle ranching, cattle grazing, and soy production. Also, Democratic Republic of Congo is a very big country for deforestation. There, the regions are a little bit different: smallholder farming, charcoal production, for instance. Highest increase in this year, 2022 year, was in Ghana, where cocoa farming is a major driver. Bolivia, soy farming is major driver. Cameroon, where there's several commodities: palm oil, cacao, and even rubber growing. And Colombia, where there's large-scale cattle and also ranching, and then also coffee and some other drivers also. Luckily, there's decrease also. For instance, in Indonesia and Malaysia, there is a positive trend in the deforestation, so it's reduced. And the EU impacts on deforestation you can see here. So we are still very big market for deforestation products. The second biggest after China, and this report, which is a couple of years back, it says that is 16% of the whole market for deforestation products. So the biggest in EU level is soy, then palm oil, then beef, and then wood products, and then cacao, and then coffee. In Finland, it is a little bit different. There is also data which is describing the deforestation impact of Finnish consumption. So coffee has the biggest deforestation risk, and then soy and the forest and logging impacts, then cacao, then palm oil, rubber, and beef. And these are, of course, all included in the EUDR Deforestation Regulation. This map shows, this is in Finnish, so it shows where the products are produced, the deforestation risk products, which come to Finnish markets, where they are mostly produced. So we can see that these are also the same areas, which are the deforestation hotspots and the deforestation fronts. So South America, there's a lot of soy production, beef production, Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, Brazil, which are also the areas where these products are imported to Finland. And then in Africa, mostly it's cacao, which is coming from Central and West Africa. And then in Southeast Asia, Indonesia and other countries, there's a lot of palm oil, rubber, wood products, and to some extent beef from Australia. So if we look a little bit closer, the global impacts of the deforestation risk impacts of certain commodities. So coffee has a very high deforestation risk in South and Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil, where there's a big risk. And also a lot of coffee is imported from those countries to Finland. And then cocoa, a lot of cocoa is imported to Finland, also from West Africa. The biggest producer countries, Ghana and Ivory Coast, have lost a very big share of their natural forest and are still losing. And the main driver is the cacao production. So we have to be very cautious here also when this cacao is coming also to Finland. And then rubber. There is over 2 million hectares of deforestation linked to rubber production, mainly in Southeast Asia. And still, it's estimated that 1 million hectares of plantations are located in high biodiversity areas. And this is also growing. The demand is growing for rubber. And one high-risk area specifically is Cambodia, but it's also growing in Africa. Then soy and beef are mainly produced in South America, countries like Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina. And then this production takes place actually mostly outside the Amazon region in Cerrado, Chaco, Atlantic Forest. And these are not necessarily fully included at the moment in the EUDR. Palm oil, main driver for deforestation is in Indonesia and Malaysia, although slightly decreasing, but it's also growing in Africa and South America to some extent. And then wood and pulp plantations have a historically quite big deforestation impact. Then after, in recent years, maybe not that big anymore, but now there is some signs that it might be growing again, especially in Indonesia. And which are not included in the EUDR, but of course there's a lot of deforestation impacts coming from other production like mining, and then the production of maize, sugarcane, cassava, rice, and vanilla. And then, like I mentioned, that for instance, for the soy and beef production in South America, it takes place in those ecoregions which are not considered necessarily as forest. There are other wooded lands which are not included in the EUDR, but hopefully the Commission will also come up with some kind of a analysis and suggestion that these would be also at some point included in the EUDR, just to make sure that all the deforestation impact is considered. So thank you in my behalf, welcome again for the webinar, and sorry for the inconvenience in the beginning of the webinar. If you have any questions, please, you can always contact me with any questions. And without further ado, I think we should continue to our next presenter. So my colleague Anke Schulmeister from European Policy Office. So go ahead, Anke. And just a reminder to everyone, you can put questions and comments in the Q&A with the Q&A button, or also in the chat if you want. Anke, you are muted if you are trying to talk to us.
So, yeah, good afternoon. I'm really sorry at the moment. Here we go, trying to change the way I'm presenting. So can everybody see my presentation now?
Yes, we can see it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for this invitation. I know we are a bit behind time, and I could theoretically get this all up by speaking in my normal speaking speed, but I'm not sure that this would actually help because then I'm told nobody understands what I'm saying. So I'm going to slow down. Also, just to be very clear, my focus of the presentation today is the implementation, but it's a more simple presentation. It is not going to give you all the answers that you might look for. I'm happy to actually answer questions or comments afterwards. So just maybe to quickly raise the point on why we are all here. I just, took a little bit of a quote on the first article of the IPCC climate change report from 2023, which actually shows that greenhouse gas emissions have continued to increase. They're actually at historical high. And some of the reasons mentioned are the unsustainable energy use, land use and land use change, lifestyle patterns of consumption and production across regions, between but also within countries and among individuals. And high confidence means they're pretty sure that this is the reason. I just wanted to make everybody clear that we are here because the destruction of forests and other ecosystems destroys the basis for your business, but also for all of our future. And I think, we're here to see how we can find a common way forward together. This is actually a slide which I used to show a bit people where we are. I call it the implementation train. So you will be rightly aware, and also Maija said something that the EUDR entered into force last June, but will only apply to companies by the end of this year. We had a deadline already on the 31st of December for nominating the competent authorities in the member states. Quite a few member states have done that, including Finland. Others haven't, so to be seen. The next big element with regard to the Deforestation Regulation was the impact assessment, which was supposed to be presented by the European Commission by end of June this year on whether other wooded land should be included. We hear now that this timeline will likely be delayed. Also, by December of this year, the European Commission has to present a methodology and for risk benchmarking of countries and the list of those countries. Currently, as far as I'm aware, there have no consultants been selected yet, to be seen how that works. And of course, in December, this law is going to apply to large and medium-sized companies, and as of June, end of June next year, on to small and micro enterprises. Also, in June next year, there is the deadline for impact assessment on other ecosystems. But this doesn't mean that nothing is happening currently. I'm just, giving you a bit of an overview that the European Commission is actually regularly updating the frequently asked questions. There was a last update in December, and the next one is expected for the end of March. With the FAQs, they're trying to answer some of the questions which have been raised by business and others to clarify a bit further what implications of the law are. Also, the European Commission is working on a guidance document where they would like to look into the definition of agriculture use, the role of certification, a number of definitions, the legality aspects, and this is under development. They couldn't exactly say when this is going to be presented. Also, the Commission is currently working on an information system. Pilot phase has been carried out with a number of companies, and the EC is now updating the system. We got an update 2 weeks ago that they are planning to look into a number of elements from feedback that they received from companies. Just to show you that there might not be a lot of, let's say, public announcement, a lot of work is going on at the moment to get the EUDR ready. So I wanted to just give you a view into what we consider to be the biggest challenges for the implementation of the EUDR, and they might not necessarily be the same as you think they could be from your perspective, but I do think that they are definitely linked. I think for us, one of the biggest challenges is weak enforcement. So I've been already engaged in the European policy world when the EU timber regulation was being negotiated and then implemented. And one of the biggest challenges we had with the EU timber regulation was the weak enforcement. So we need to have strict laws and penalties, and we need to have thorough and sufficient checks across the EU to be able to make this a law that bites. And I think, that's one of the challenges we see. If there are not enough checks, And if there's not enough strict laws and penalties, it will also not be in the favor for companies because there will be no level playing field across the EU. Also, if there's a lack of coordination, cooperation amongst EU member states, and that needs to be seen, how to deal with a number of transborder traded commodities, or when suspicious behavior has been found, that is not happening in one way or the other, then it's going to be difficult to make this law work. We see as a challenge currently the EC information system, because it has, as far as we understand, until now, no pre-warning function for national authorities in case there are certain things not working. But the EC information system is the basic system that the member states need to use to be able to control shipments or other due diligence statements which were coming. And what we would like to avoid is that there's space for more illegality, but also illegality with regard to the legislation by corruption or laundering, which is going to continue because if there are no checks or no proper checks taking place. And that also means for companies there will be no level playing field. We think it's important that everybody is treated the same and the law is applied the same across the EU to make sure that everybody has the same chances. And we also think that there is a danger of weak due diligence. We know that some companies are looking for loopholes and ways to circumvent the law. That's an experience we have from the WTO regulation. I do not with that say that any of you is planning to do that, but this was a reality that we faced. Also, there is sometimes this impression to wait for the ultimate guidance from the European Commission. And I do not think that this is something that is helping to put the way forward. I think what we should try to figure out is to look together into solutions, how we can address those challenges, whilst moving ahead to make this law work. And, also I wanted to give you some of the main elements in a view from our side. So a lot of questions are always happening about traceability, but it is not a new concept in the EU. The EU food law actually is requiring quite detailed that the origins that your products came from. The WTO regulation is already asking for information about countries and regions in case of an increased risk. The EC information system, it is actually, and that's something maybe to understand, aimed at competent authorities. So it is not a system that is there to for companies to carry out their due diligence. They should have the system ready, and they should be here when they provide information to the system that the products they would like to put into the system are not linked to deforestation or forest degradation for timber or any other illegal elements. So I think, in the information system, there's one challenge with it. It's work in progress. We personally think, we are lacking a pre-warning system, but we also know that the Commission is now really working on it and trying to figure out what can be done to make it easier for companies. But I can agree that there's still quite a bit to be done. EU guidance or frequently asked questions. As I said, there will be no tick box exercise. Also because companies have, I think, to a large extent already certain systems in place to control their suppliers, and a system that will help you to work on this that you would like to develop is best based on your experience and on the way that you are looking into your own supply chains. It is a fluid way of looking into this because the legislation allows you to use different ways. There's a way to either use certification or other elements to fulfill it. In the end, what the company bears is the responsibility that if something is not aligned with the legislation, that you can explain why that is. And if you cannot explain that, there has been actually a problem with your certification system. Also, let's be very clear that certain details of the requirements will likely be further determined by the European Commission through the FAQ and guidance, but a few things might ultimately be decided in court, because over a long-term perspective. So what I'm trying to say is, it shouldn't hinder us from getting started. The country risk benchmarking system, it's actually a very main factor, or it has a main role for member states for enforcement, because the number of checks is linked to the category a country is given in the risk benchmarking system. I have the impression that there's a lot of unclarity or a lot of confusion about what the country risk benchmarking is. This country risk benchmarking is being handed out for a country, but this law applies to companies. So whether a country is a high standard or low situation in the benchmarking system, that doesn't mean that you cannot export from those countries, because it's up to the companies to determine whether they think what they are placing on the European market is fulfilling the requirements of the law. I know that there is for low-risk countries the simplified due diligence approach in legislation, but you still need to collect all the information which is required by the legislation. All that it means is you don't have to carry out a full impact assessment system, but in case if you collect the information and figure out that something is not right, that needs to be justified. You know, it is, I think, not necessarily the best way to wait that a country is put into a low-risk category, because you should be aware how your supply chains operate in one way or the other. So, I mean, I just like to put at the end of my presentation that we go the way together. This is not just, you know, businesses or just NGOs or just the Commission or just the member states, it's all together. So we go the way together, we learn together. We cannot answer all questions now. You know, and of course, it is good to raise concerns and questions, but don't expect that all answers are going to be provided. You know, it's good to also look for solutions yourself and trust in your experience. When we talk about looking into solutions for yourself, is, you know, trying to see from a legal perspective, have an exchange with lawyers to figure out, okay, what could be a challenge, what couldn't be a challenge. Try to see where, you know, what different options you could take to clarify a bit further what is happening, and do not always call on the Commission to answer all the questions. You know, you have experience in your sector, and quite a lot. So, you know, you will also know how to fulfill certain requirements. Look right and left for inspiration and support. You know, I have the impression, and me coming from the forest sector, we sometimes get stuck into silos, but, you know, there might be lots of experience in other sectors. The cocoa sector, for example, is more advanced, I would say, in looking into mapping out certain supply chains than the rubber sector might be. Or, you know, there are certain systems that other sectors are going to use, or other laws where this is applied, where, you know, inspiration could be taken from, and also support from those who are working on this. Let's keep in mind that what we are working on here is a paradigm shift. After years of commitments made by governments, but also by companies, about having deforestation-free supply chains, the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, actually had committed, and with that, the EU, to halt deforestation by 2020. We are in 2024, and it's still ongoing. So this legislation actually is a chance to make it work. And I think, you know, what we should try to do is try to see together how we can make it work. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Anke. And guys, if you have any questions for Anke or comments, you can put them in the Q&A with the Q&A button, or if you don't want to use that, then you can also use the chat. And now we have Viktor Harvio from the Minister for Agriculture and Forestry from Finland to present the status of the regulation in Finland. So welcome, Viktor. Feel free to share your if you have presentation.
Thank you, Maija. This time, unfortunately, you're going to have to look at my face. Just I will go through a verbal presentation this time, if that's okay. Hopefully.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Great. So thank you once again, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for WWF for organizing this event around a very important topic, and also for having me here today to tell a little bit about the implementation of the EUDR in Finland. So I work a little bit about myself. I work as a senior specialist at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland, now around pretty precisely one year today. I work in the Natural Resources Department in the Forests and Bioeconomy unit, where this EUDR implementation is done. But also we have the other department, the Food Department, also very involved in this process. So the ministry is working with the implementation together. Myself, I'm working also with international cooperation and European forest research, but the main task, of course, at the moment is the implementation of the EU Deforestation Regulation. Also, I am one of the secretaries in the working group for national implementation. So, as we know, the regulation entered into force in end of June last year, and currently we are going through the transition period. Entry into application will be happening 13th December 2024, so end of this year. So meaning we have a quite tight schedule with this. Aim of the Deforestation Regulation is important to minimize EU share of global deforestation and degradation of forests. The regulation is important for addressing climate change and loss of biodiversity. At the same time, it is also quite challenging for both EU member states and third countries where a majority of the relevant commodities listed in the regulation are produced. We know the regulation concerns 7 commodities: cattle, cacao, coffee, oil palm, rubber, soy, and wood. Regarding primary production, quite the same as in other EU countries as well. Here in Finland, it concerns cattle and wood. Finland's challenges have then namely primarily been about these 2 commodities, cattle and wood, especially regarding cattle production and construction investments related to those, but also the forest sector as a whole, how it will be implementing this regulation has been a big question here, as well as the retroactive effect of the regulation, the so-called cutoff date, which is end of 2020. To implement this regulation, we have set, like I mentioned earlier, set a working group for preparation of national implementation. It was set by the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry for around a term around a year. It was set in 28th of August last year, and it is going to be around until end of September next year, so a bit more than a year. And the aim is to support the preparation of a governmental proposal regarding the EU Deforestation Regulation. And the working group consists of officials and essential stakeholders who are affected by the regulation. It will be a finance act, also in the end, meaning legislative proposal affecting state revenues or commanding appropriations to purposes set out in the law. In the working
Seems that we have a little bit bad connection with Viktor. Viktor, can you hear us? I think we lost Viktor, but maybe yes, we.
Yes, I think you lost me for a moment there. But
maybe 10 seconds or so. So no worries.
All right, great. So what I was about to tell you was about what the working group has so far going through the EUDR, the close cousin, so to say, to the EUDR. Tasks of the competent authority, the Finnish Food Authority, national timber and the forest sector, the cattle sector, and the food industry. How will these due diligence and all the processes regarding the implementation, how will they be done in these sectors? And lastly, we have gone through import and export questions. In addition to that, we had a trilogy webinars that were meant to appeal a bigger audience, and the last trilogy of this trilogy webinar was held this week about export and import, and the 2 previous ones were about forest sector and agricultural sector. Upcoming is the 6th meeting of the working group, 14th March, when we will be going through the penalties regarding the EUDR, so Article 25. Also, 26th March, we will be having a hearing. During the summer, the proposal will be sent for public consultation. So we are looking forward to receiving a lot of good comments during the summer. For around 8 weeks, I believe that the consultation will be open. And in the autumn, the feedback will be analyzed and the government proposal will be finalized before sending it to the parliament in September 2024. In addition to the working group or during the work of the working group, we are also assessing the impacts in Finland. This will be carried out by the Natural Resources Institute Finland, also known by the name LUCA. There we will be assessing impacts on forests, agricultural land, also different operators, farmers, forest owners, forest industry, energy sector, the food industry and commerce, and so on. Everyone that is affected here by the regulation. So we will be concluding with getting the environmental, economic, and social effects of the regulation. The schedule is very tight, but we are hoping to get the results or most of the results by end of March. As you probably know already, and was mentioned in Anke's presentation, that Finland also has nominated the competent authority, that is the Finnish Food Authority. This was informed to the Commission in December. The final decision will, of course, be made by the Parliament when the national law is sent to them. Why would somebody ask that? Why food authority? We saw that they were very strong. They had already strong competence as they have been the competent authority in EUDR. We also know that they have been following very closely to EUDR, and it was quite clear choice, I guess, here in Finland. I know that in other countries there might be other competent authorities as well, not just only one. But like I said, the final decision will be made in next autumn by the Parliament. So what is also important at the moment is that we need to build the resources and the capacity for the competent authority. Currently, focus is also in communication to operators and consultation, and adding the resources to them. Hopefully, there will be more ways of communication and consultation in the near future, webinars and perhaps more written in Finnish as well, FAQs and such. But this will be seen a bit later during the spring. And also next autumn we will also know a bit better what kind of resources will actually be needed as the Lucas impact assessment will be ready and some of the open questions are answered. But the competent authority will be one of the main channels for for receiving information and consultation. And I also warmly recommend ordering Food Authority's newsletter about EUDR. Perhaps we will be putting it in the chat box. Also, was mentioned in the previous presentation was the country risk benchmarking. We're also waiting for that. We know that the default will be in Finland the middle risk currently, and then the assessment we'll see will we stay there or move upwards or downwards. Anyways, we are working together with the Commission and other member states on open questions, interpretations, and then how to go on with the implementation. We're waiting for the Commission's FAQs that we believe that I think Commission said a week or two ago that the updated FAQs are expected to be launched end of March already, so not too long to go, and the guidelines would be in the second quarter of this year, so a bit further away. Also, nationally, we are of course working with the interpretations, and we know that there are many important open questions that operators are waiting to be addressed. But all in all, this is a very important step towards deforestation-free supply chains, and at the same time, we know the concerns on the different sectors regarding the implementation, and we know that the schedule is quite tight. This was about what I was about to say, so I thank you, and I'll be here waiting in case there will be any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Viktor. We have now possibility for questions and comments also. So you can put them in the Q&A box, or if not able to do that, then in the chat as well, and then we will take them here. And then also, if you wish to just raise your hand and say the question out loud, that you are very welcome to do it. We have 10 minutes now, and we are very well in the schedule now. I will now say this first question. We get one from Fazer Anna-Lena Siljanmaa. There have been news that different stakeholders are asking the EU to delay the implementation. Is it possible or probable that this would happen? I would first, I think, direct this to Anke, and then also Viktor, if you have anything regarding Finland, then you could also answer.
Sorry, I had a quick glitch. What exactly is the question?
Yeah,
sorry.
The question is that there have been news that different stakeholders are asking the EU to delay the implementation. Is it possible or probable that this could happen?
So this is actually a very interesting question. So the legislation sets actually a clear date when this law is supposed to be implemented, and that is end of December for this year and mid of June next year. That is a legally set date, which cannot be changed like that, or just be postponed like that. Normally, this requires actually a co-decision procedure between the member states and the parliament to do so. However, what we think is that we should keep that date. I mean, this legislation has been in the making for a longer time, and I think a few things will need to come together. But I think it's time that we, by the end of the year, start the implementation of this legislation.
Thank you, Anke. Viktor, do you have any, regarding Finland, has there been any request to, of course, Finland cannot do it because it's an EU law, but anyways.
Yeah, well, you said it quite well. Of course, we are also hearing these rumors, but regarding the national implementation, we are of course going forward as the current state of play is.
Yes, thank you. And I think it seems that everything is moving quite well ahead, even though there is not too much time, but still it is processing. The second question, and maybe this is for Viktor, could you tell more about the obstacles Finland has been identifying regarding cattle and wood in the EUDR?
Okay, so regarding the cattle production, the main questions has been relating, like I mentioned earlier, the cutoff date, the retroactive perspective of the regulation. Of course, farmers have been doing investments and these questions, when we don't know exact interpretations of everything quite yet, then this also may raise some concerns, as well as of course the future aspect of this. We know we are a very forested country. Around 75% is forest, and if you need to do some kind of investments, is it infrastructure or regarding agricultural land or anything, it unfortunately quite often may require cutting of trees. But these are still some questions that we are going through, and I'm sure that this will be also addressed in the guidelines and FAQs regarding the forest sector. I guess the background is the foundation, perhaps, that the regulation will be considering the primary forest and transforming the primary forests into economic forests. So we know that the primary forests, there's very little of them that is not in the already protected areas in Finland, and we know that in the wood industry, the supply chains can be quite complex, and when we are looking into the due diligence and making due diligence statements, there is a possibility of quite much manual labor as well, which has been one of the concerns. But I know that the Commission is now looking into so-called API solutions, so automated solutions that may also be helpful in this situation. Thanks.
Thank you. And Anke, you want to answer that also?
I would just like to remind people that, especially for the timber sector, the requirements about due diligence is not something new. I mean, the EU timber regulation has required that for quite some time. Let's be clear, about for 10 years. And I think there could be quite some experience which could be taken from there. I think how did you report, or did the timber sector report on this under the timber regulation? What can be done further? Also, in addition to that, as Viktor just said, the EUDR, Deforestation Regulation defines quite clearly what is considered to be a primary forest or a natural regenerating forest, and what degradation means, which is a conversion from one forest type into another.
Thank you. And I think, Anke, maybe this goes for you also, or if there's anybody else in the call who also feels that they have answer for this, but can you open up what due diligence could include, for instance, regarding natural rubber, which typically is sourced by agents or stock exchange? Does it concern supply chain in general or each batch?
I think that my colleague, Mike Stuver, will be very happy to answer that. But I mean, just generally about the EUDR, and maybe Viktor also wants to say, this legislation is actually based on due diligence statements. And in the due diligence statements, you would need to provide the origins for each shipment that is arriving in the EU. So we know that the last FAQ of the European Commission had said that you could put in all potential plots of land that these elements of the shipment could have come from, if you can prove that for these plots of land there has been no deforestation taking place after 2020, or for rubber if it's timber, no degradation. But in the end, this legislation I would consider to be a batch-based legislation. I mean, maybe not the batch that is harvested, but the batch that is placed on the European market.
Thank you. Does Michael feel that you want to answer also this?
No, I wouldn't be able to contribute to that.
Okay, great. At the moment, there's no more questions in the Q&A. You can put more, and even when we continue the presentations, you can put here, because all the presenters have a right to answer, so they can also type the answers. But I have one question, and this is both for Anke and Viktor. So in general, what is your kind of like a feeling now that we are now in March, and the law is already it will apply to the companies by the early next year. So how do you feel on the EU level, Anke? Where are we in a way on our readiness to implement the law? And also the same for Viktor, because I know that a lot of processes are taking place already. It looks quite good. How do you feel that where we are at the moment, how ready we are?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question, because there's so many things in motion, and it's a lot in motion, and I'm very positive about that. We are on a good way having it in motion. What worries me a bit is what is going to happen at member state level. And again, this is nothing against the Finns, but we need to look into the fact that we are working in a space of 27 EU member states. And what worries me is that we're going to have some countries, I hope including Finland, be very ready by the end of the year, others not very much, and that this will have the negative impacts actually on the element of having a level playing field. Because if then other companies just try to go and do it elsewhere where there are less checks, that's not going to helpful for the ones who are trying to do a good job. And I think there would be a bit more push needed to make sure that the member states work all together on this, and try to keep the timelines in there. But overall, I think we are on a good way. There are, of course, certain hiccups. I mean, the road is never straight. Would also be boring, I have to say. And I think it's important that awareness is raised about what still the challenges are, but also that every stakeholder is looking into, okay, what can I do, what can I learn to make this work. But I personally do think that we are not necessarily behind, and that we can be ready by December.
Great, thanks. And Viktor, how ready is Finland?
Good question. I guess regarding the national legislations, I'm quite sure that those will be on time, and the necessary resources will be then appointed. But at the same time, this is for many sectors a bit of a new thing. Some sectors have been doing due diligence a bit more than others, and it might be a bit easier for others. Also, of course, there is the concern for third countries that they will what they need to be doing, and fortunately, also the EU and the Commission is trying to assist in that regarding to the Team Europe initiatives, for instance. But yeah, I guess the train is at the moment going forward with a high speed, and we are catching up and trying to find the needed answers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's continue then to the second part of the webinar. We will have my colleague Michael Stu presenting on the sort of needs for good data quality on the producer side and on the ground, to make sure that we end up with a good law implementation. And I will share Michael's presentation, and then Michael can speak. So let's see. All right, we are ready now. Go ahead, Michael.
Maija, can you put that on the full screen?
Yes, on my stream it is now full, but is it not? Then I try again. This is interesting because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Let's see. Is it
Not
now?
yet.
Not
Not
yet.
yet.
No. Alrighty. Then this we try once more. Just a second. One more try. No.
Yeah, not yet. You may be hitting the wrong icon. Shall I try from this side?
You can try, yeah. Let's try that way. It's interesting, like one presentation works and the other one doesn't.
Okay, that should be there.
Let's see. Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Good. Okay, Maija, thank you very much. And thanks a lot for the invitation, especially I'm happy to be in Finland today, actually, electronically, because some 22, 23 years ago, it was a Finnish company, UPM Kymmene, who helped us stop the deforestation of a huge, huge elephant forest in Sumatra. And that showed us at that time, long time ago for all this, how important the global buying community is, how important it is to have leaders who decide to help change the situation on the ground. So today, my talk is all going to be about the first mile, the little distance between the farm and the first corporate processor out there, because that's where it all happens. That's where the forests fall, and that's where the rights are violated. And the problem for the first mile, of course, is that the data that are relevant for EUDR are all collected at that point. So what EUDR did, it added a completely new value to raw materials, a value farmers, smallholders never had before, the value of data. Suddenly, it's not only a product that leaves a little 2-hectare plantation somewhere in the tropical belt, but it's a product with data that leaves that areas. And farmers can choose whether they want to add that value to their products, and buyers can choose whether they want to pay farmers extra for that value. To unravel this, I distinguish 3 different systems through which raw materials and data flow. We have the production of the commodity on a farm and the transport of that raw material to the first corporate processor. In many cases, probably the first corporate contact any farmer has in those areas. The second mile, I call the flow of the raw material and the data from that first processor to the reporting entity somewhere in the EU. And the third mile, of course, is all the raw material flows and all the data flows inside the reporting company. Essential, what we found in this last year where we tried to make all this work, is that the smoother these systems talk to each other and the more they ensure the integrity of the data they crunch, the more easy EUDR reporting will be, and the more likely EUDR will reach its goal of protecting forests and people. Right now, it doesn't look too easy. The first mile is where all the essential data are collected, but this is also where the forests are lost and all the rights are violated. And for all the corporate lawyers out there, this is where the potential legal and reputational risks lurk for the importing companies. And of course, most importers have absolutely no control over what happens in the first mile. The second mile, there is a little bit of control beyond the tier one. And this is where the reporting companies and the service providers they most likely will hire have to unravel the supply chains. This is where the administrative headaches begin to make sure that all the required data are collected, that the risk is assessed, and if necessary is mitigated. And then all of that is assembled into the due diligence report. And the third mile, of course, full control, it's within the company. And this is, of course, where you need to find out what commodities are subject to EUDR. What do I have? What do I do? What do I need to do? And how do I verify? And then submit my due diligence reports. And this is the point, at least for many companies that I've been talking to, where the corporate lawyers are most worried about what actually is in those due diligence reports. The service providers we talk to, the guys who offer full service to produce due diligence reports for importers, generally say that they are not responsible for the data they crunch. They crunch, but they argue that it is the contracting company, the importing company's responsibility to assure the quality of these data. The result of many of the service providers are beautiful, really smashing, beautiful supply chain diagrams that show, often animated, how a company's supplies flow around the world. But for these, the old lesson applies: garbage in, garbage out. What actually is in those data that people are using to produce these supply chain diagrams? And when you then look at the beginning of it all, at the first mile, it's nebulous, it's unverifiable. Nobody has any idea what goes on for many of the commodities in many countries. As an example, I put a picture down here, a photo we took of a national park in Sumatra when we were flying over it, and we suddenly saw this huge new area deforested in a beautiful way, in a very geometric, professional pattern, very unlike of the usual deforestation. And then our teams tried to figure out who has been deforesting there. It turned to be a high-ranking officer in the Indonesian military who decided he'll put a big plantation, oil palm plantation, into a national park. So when we are following trucks that come with raw material out of areas like this, they never go directly to the processor. They continue to take very long routes and make it a point that they enter the processing gate from the wrong side, so nobody can link their raw materials to an illegal area. That's the problem of the first mile. So how do we get the data right? How do we make sure this doesn't happen? And of course, having worked there for so long, we looked at Indonesia, the #1 in palm, #2 in rubber, #3 in cacao, and #4 in coffee. So Indonesia really is crucial for EUDR. And if the EU gets Indonesia right, EUDR will be off and running. It's one of the main countries out there. More importantly, if you look at the percentages of smallholders that produce these 4 commodities, you will see that most of the production actually is on farms of 2, 3, 4, 5 hectares. So a huge, absolutely unbelievable task of mapping and dealing with millions of smallholders who produce these commodities. But even though they are the ones who produce most of the stuff, at least Indonesia's smallholders are already falling behind the EUDR curve. Companies are shying away from the daunting task of registering millions of smallholders, especially those that are operating close to forest systems where the risk may be high. They argue it's impossible to map all the smallholders. But in that respect, there's very little to worry because lots of new and efficient and easy tools have been developed. The problem is really what happens with the data after that. How do they flow from the first to the third one? The arguments that we hear most in that companies use why they shy away from mapping and dealing with smallholders is that they can't be found. They're hidden behind several opaque layers of dealers and agents who don't want to divulge the sources from which they buy their stuff. Smallholders may not be registered and not have land titles. They may not be organized in farmer groups and associations through which one can go to reach them, train them, and work with them. And maybe most of all, the very small volumes that come from a given farm may be aggregated at successive collection points before finally reaching a process. Luckily, all of these issues are taken care of by a whole number of different apps and systems that sprouted after EUDR was announced. And now anybody can choose which app to use and start logging smallholders. The problem, of course, remains you can only do so once you've found the farm. The other arguments that companies use to try not be dealing with smallholders is that they may be located in land use zones that do not allow the commodity to be grown, sometimes inside national parks and protected areas. They may be located on land traditionally owned by indigenous communities, something that is especially risky if you want in Vietnam, Cambodia areas. They may have children working on that. They may not deploy industry standard health and safety procedures. And for us, in my mind, maybe the worst of all, they may not be owned by smallholders at all. But those operations are well-organized criminal gangs who hire people to pose as smallholders and to pretend that they are, but in truth, it's a criminal enterprise. No matter what the situation, however, we really do not see any incentive for smallholders to switch to sustainable production because they are paid very poorly for their raw materials. We had one of the biggest, or the biggest, rubber processor in the world, halt, published a study 3 years ago that said that rubber smallholders in Thailand and Indonesia were paid less for their raw material than the national poverty lines. So the, let's say, unintended consequences of these fears of the companies who want to have mapped their supplies for EUDR and be ready for when it starts is that they focus on smallholders that are likely compliant, those farms that are located in huge oceans of long existing plantations where deforestation is no longer an issue. And they're arranging longer-term contracts with the agents that buy from these farms. Companies have begun locking in contracts with corporate plantations, assuming that all the due diligence reporting is easier and poses fewer risks if you deal with the corporate plantations. And buyers have begun segregating compliant from risky supplies and divert the latter ones to markets who care and, of course, pay less, like China, India, and Indonesia. So if you look at this trend that we are seeing today as we speak, as the first companies are getting ready to create their supplier databases, it indicates that EUDR's impact will be very much reduced if the farms who are operating on the edge of the forests continue to be ignored, because that, of course, is exactly the areas that the EUDR tried to reach.
Michael, if you have 1 minute more, we're a little bit behind schedule, so that would be perfect.
Okay, so let's go to the leaders. As all these discussions are going on, and as we realize how little information of what actually needs to be done is available already, I put together a few bullets of what a leader can do. And the most important thing is that leaders will recognize sustainability as a value that smallholders can add to their raw material, and that value needs to be paid for, and that the capacity to create that value, to operate sustainably, needs to be built. So the guidance, the suggestions is try and find ways to pay a fair price for the raw material and build farmers' capacities to increase sustainable supply. Second, support the goal of EUDR to help the world's forests and people. Do not reject smallholder raw materials, but support the smallholders operating at the forest edge to grow sustainably. That's the smallholders that matter. That's the ones who may, in the future, deforest. And finally, it is essential to believe that high-quality first-mile data enter the due diligence report. So we suggest that companies technically and financially support the frontline processors to establish professional data collection processes in their supply chains. And that it would be good to join pre-competitive industry interest groups to tackle this huge task of creating the EUDR supplier databases. We've seen that some major commodity traders created a company to generate all the EUDR relevant compliance data. We see that tire makers have written an operational guidance for all the processors in the world to collect just the right information required by EUDR. And of course, Preferred by Nature has published an interpretation of EUDR, listing what they consider the indicators that would lead to compliance. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Michael. And please, everyone, take this opportunity to ask questions from Michael, because he has long experience in working in Indonesia with the smallholders, on the traceability, on the transparency. So he has probably very good information for you. So next we move on. We have now a company presentation from Paulig. Salla Sulasuo will present how is Paulig as a company now proceeding to be ready for the EUDR. So floor is yours.
Thanks, Maija, and thank you for the invitation for the webinar. Really interesting previous contributions, and I was happy to hear a few of the key summary reflections from both Anke and Michael, in particularly how you're looking at the space to evolve, and they're quite aligned with our thinking. Just to double check, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see very well and hear you very well.
Perfect. Just to start off, I think, we've had quite a few of these presentations and discussions with different stakeholders, both, of course, in our own value chain, and tried to share a little bit our approach for others. At Paulig, where we always start with this, I guess, discussion is that we do fundamentally support the efforts to improve the traceability of commodities and protect and restore forests. And I would say that, like the previous speakers, we actually recognize that there has been a lot of good things that have already resulted. So we do see a quite big mobilization in the industry, in different industries that we are part of, or different commodity value chains that we are part of. So it has definitely spurred a lot of activities and new tools, new resources. but I still must, like from a company perspective, kind of bring into the realism in this picture that this timeline is extremely short. So I think from that perspective, we also want to be very honest, and we've tried to take part in a constructive way in how we can improve the approach and what could be done, what could be immediate steps, and how we can alleviate some of the burden for the many actors in these value chains. Paulig, for those of you who do not know us, I noticed that the list of attendees are quite Finnish and quite a lot of Finnish names. So I think most know Paulig from our coffee, but we do have quite big portfolio of other products, namely on the Tex-Mex categories, spices, and other products. So this means that coffee is actually not the only commodity that we're looking at when we're looking at our compliance in the EUDR. So we have also some derivatives. So it's been quite a big effort in the past years actually to map our ingredients and products that we have in our portfolio. And from this perspective, this is an effort we've actually done for quite a few years from different perspectives, not obviously in the scope of EUDR as such, but in terms of improving the traceability and understanding of our value chains and looking at various sustainability aspects of our products. So we do feel that we've had and we have fairly good visibility to certain value chains. We've worked for years with certification systems. When we talk about coffee, these are the likes of Fair Trade Organic or Rainforest Alliance, as well as some own certification schemes from our suppliers, the big traders, for instance, and other commodities have different certification schemes as well. We also have quite a lot of tailored projects in the origin countries where we directly engage with farmer communities and tailor longer term projects in developing regenerative agriculture and following the practices in the area. So in those cases, of course, there's a different degree of traceability and visibility all the way to the first mile, as Michael said. So we think we're in a different position than a lot of the buyers that buy bulk produce from traders where there is no visibility, but still there is a lot of work to be done. I think particularly in harnessing our internal IT systems to ensure that the batches can be traced all the way to the clients. And at the same time, of course, making sure that everything we do with our suppliers are meeting the criteria, if we're using the right tools at the moment, and if we are actually able to be really certain that the data flows are intact. When it comes to certification schemes, I saw that there were a lot of discussions about these. In the original guidance, the certification schemes were considered not to be sufficient, but we do see that there's a lot of development from the certification schemes like Rainforest Alliance and Fair Trade to add modules to their approaches. But these are quite slow. So I would say that this is also a hindrance for the timeline. When we talk about their auditing processes, when we count backwards into when this thing should be already in place, we do see quite a lot of hurdles in them getting the systems up to speed in that time. But I think they are currently the best bet in some of these value chains because there's a lot of geolocation data and processes to audit these locations from the certification schemes. From our own perspective, this has been quite a lot of effort, and we brought together a cross-functional team, which means that we have, IT working very heavily at the moment, looking at our internal databases and tools, ERP systems, for instance. Sourcing, of course, we have ongoing discussions with our suppliers and how they're advancing and mapping the locations of our produce, as well as I guess exchanging information and approaches on satellite imaginary tools. So at the moment, everyone's a little bit looking at their own responsibilities and which steps should every part in the value chain take. And I think at the moment, everyone's sort of taking the same steps. So we're trying to figure out and streamline and compare our notes, if you will, in some of these tools. So this is a discussion also with suppliers, but at the same time with some of our customers. So we're trying to share approaches and tools to both directions. I do say that we are also working on a lot of voluntary schemes. So for instance, we do have a project going on to map our land use change emissions more accurately. So a lot of these developments on tracking the geolocations and historical deforestation data, if there has been any, will also serve in other projects and in other activities. And for us, it's important that we accurately measure our impacts and, of course, make sure that no harmful activities are happening in our locations. We will be providing future updates on our activities, but just to round off with some of the worries, I think, which were echoed by the previous speakers. But very shortly on coffee. We do buy coffee from approximately 20 different countries. So some of these, it's quite, well, not easy, but it's much easier to track the origins. If there's our big plantations in some, as we heard from Michael, they might be smallholders, particularly in the African countries. So then we might talk about really, really small plantations. For us, it has been more of a philosophical approach to source from smallhold farmers, and we tried to also improve the livelihoods and longer-term resilience of some of these locations. But we don't really want this to change. But at the same time, of course, we need to be realistic with the timelines, how fast we can develop some of these processes for the smallest suppliers. And for instance, for some of the African regions, the next harvest for coffee could be already this summer, so a few months away. So this is a reality. We are working very hard to look what we can do, but there is a worry that this might somehow change the diversity of our supply or our philosophical approach to sourcing, if you will. Then I think for big players like us, working out the details of the data transfer within the chain, I think we can probably manage. Well, maybe this is too optimistic, but I do think that it is more about just exchanging the ideas and ways of working with different partners. And because we've had this approach on certifications for quite a long time, I think we can do it. But for smaller players, I think this will be a real challenge. And particularly on where to get the data. So we are, I think it was Anke who said that look left and right. We are definitely looking left and right all the time. We are part of several industry organizations. We talk with national authorities and of course our suppliers in the origin countries, but it's still quite hard actually to keep up with all the updates from the EU or different interpretations from different parties in the EU. Member states seem to have different interpretations from different aspects. So how they start to apply it, what they interpret, and who is the actual party to discuss. But then it's also simple things like the tools that are expected to be applied. So I already mentioned the satellite imagery or satellite tools. There are differences between commodities, how well they work, what will be accepted by the EU authorities. We know that only the EU absorbatory data sets are not enough. So really getting some clarity on which tools we should really advance with. So these are the topics we continue to work on as we move forward. But I do say that a lot of work ahead of us, but still also quite good developments in the past months, actually. So that has given me a little bit of optimism on this effort.
Thank you so much, Salla. A lot of information, and it seems that Paulig is doing a lot of work already, and also previously, of course, to improve the traceability. And I really like that this has come up now, also the role of the smallholders and how the industries and the companies and other players should be there to support the smallholders. so that they also can come along and make this regulation work well. So our last presentation today is from the Fazer company. Kaisa Mattson will present how Fazer is working towards the implementation of the EUDR. So welcome, Kaisa.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, very well.
All right. Then choose the right presentation. Okay, can you see the presentation?
We can see it. It's not in the presentation mode, but
okay.
We can see it. So if it's okay also if you don't want to start.
Like
now
this.
We see it. Yes, perfect. Now it's...
Okay, good. All right. Yes, my name is Kaisa Mattson and I work in Fazer food company, and I'm responsible for the sustainability programs for our supply chains, also the scope 3 emissions and human rights. Very shortly about Fazer, I think all people in Finland know us very well. But what I want to say is that we have integrated sustainability definitely in our strategy and always try to see on a positive note what we can do to improve. And thinking now about this topic, I would like to add also that we select our suppliers in a way that they would reflect our values and also be good to collaborate with and find solutions to the different challenges. Then looking at cocoa industry, because that was the topic of today. The main production is in West Africa, where we have seen there is a lot of deforestation risk. Also South America and Asia. Europe is the biggest buyer in the world. 40% of all cocoa comes to Europe. And in Europe, there is especially one hub, that's Amsterdam harbor, where I think 25% of world cocoa passes through. At Fazer, our purchasing is also in a similar way. So we buy about 75% in West Africa and 25% in Ecuador. And cocoa is really like a smallholder crop. So there is about 5 million farmers in the world, estimation, nobody knows exactly. And the farms are usually between 1 and 5 hectares. And it's also kind of a good crop for smallholders because you do the processing of the cocoa at the farm. So you farm the fruit. When it's ready, you open it, you take out the seeds inside, you ferment them and the beans, and then you dry them in your farm, and then you bring them to the first collection point. And that you can do even with the bag on your back if there is no road. So that's why there is a lot of small farmers if you compare to palm oil or some other crops where you really need like roads and stuff to transport the goods. Then like a month ago, I was attending the World Cocoa Foundation conference, annual conference. This time it was in Amsterdam. It's a very good meeting because it's kind of a round table where we have farmers, government people, NGOs, chocolate brands, cocoa producers, traders, and so on, everybody coming together for a few days. One of the main topics and what was discussed also during the breaks was this EUDR. So it's really a big concern in the industry, and people are, of course, worried what will be the effect. The main worry, of course, being that the legislation has been a bit unclear, which leads then to uncertainty on what's going to happen. However, of course, we are very welcoming the legislation because we want the consumers to enjoy eating chocolate and not being worried about deforestation or any other things, that it's important for the whole industry to maintain like good practices and good reputation. Also, like Salla mentioned, a bit of worry that what will happen with smaller companies. Big companies can for sure handle these demands, but small companies will not have really the resources to invest in satellite mapping and so on. So let's see what will be the implications. Then from EU point of view, I would like to say that this is a very bold move. Of course, interesting, good that we have had a EU Commission that has been very pro-environment. That is wonderful. But of course, this law is coming with a record implementation time, and then we should be a bit humble about this and not thinking that everything is perfect the 1st of January 2025. I think I like what the government of Holland mentioned there, that they will want to have more like a pragmatic approach. The first thing is to make sure that the traces system will work so that we can manage the flow of the goods and how we record things inside EU, and then of course the origin mapping and all that, which will get better and better over time, but with some little bit humble that it's a question for millions and millions of people in the world. So we will need more time also to train everybody to understand there on the fields what is this all about. And the main worry is, of course, concerning the farmers, that, for example, cocoa is a very important cash crop for smallholders. And I think we would like to keep it that way, but let's see where the world is going. Also, I would like to highlight that sometimes in Europe, we are thinking very European way. But this law concerns the whole world around us and countries that are very different from Europe. So let's say just for us, maybe a simple thing, a register of all the farms. In West Africa, not many countries have a register of all the farms. Also, the laws can be so different. For example, Ivory Coast that I visited, the farmer may own the land, but he is not owning the trees. So government can come at any point of time and just cut the trees. And then he's kind of in a deforestation situation and nobody will buy his cocoa. But it was not his fault because the government just came. So we need to understand these conditions in the different parts of the world. Then if we look quickly, just our supply chain, how it looks. The satellite mapping was already mentioned. It's a really good tool and very important. The first picture there on the left side is that every farm needs to be walked around to put the line that here is the farm. And then the satellite maps are showing if there is a change in the canopy. And then if there is a change, somebody needs to go there and check what has changed. Is this deforestation? If it is, we cannot buy from this farm anymore. Then the cocoa comes to Europe in these big boats in like a big pile there. And you can understand the challenge of traceability. There could be tens of thousands of farmers' cocoa in one pile, maybe even more. And then they're just moved to some smaller ship and then moved to some factory and so on. So big challenge. And then the blue there, the light blue area is from our perspective here in Fazer that we need to work with the traces system and make sure that this data is moved forward in the correct way and our systems are updated. Then quickly, just how we mitigate. So we have had this approach already since 2017. We buy all the cocoa either from certified programs, Rainforest Alliance, or some supplier have their own farmer programs. And then we have also our own farmer programs. When we buy from our own farmer programs, of course, there is like a IP level identity preserve. So then we know for sure exactly where the cocoa is coming from. But the others there has been in mass balance. And that has been a very efficient and economical way to handle cocoa. But it will, of course, the mass balance as such will not work in the future anymore. But mitigation-wise, I think we have pretty good situation. And then I want to just finish off with some things thinking about what can we do to kind of improve the situation. So I think the first and most important is to make sure that the farmers would have better income and they could get better income through better yield. So we need to help them with the farming and make it more productive. Also diversification of the trees. So it's possible to, in a cocoa farm is kind of its own trees. So it's kind of a small forest. So you can put in there different trees and get some variety. Then also we should see this as an opportunity for this land use change and this carbon market, something that the farmers could earn also through that one. And very important to have these public-private initiatives for reforestation, not to look only farm by farm and put a lot of demands on one farmer, you have to have so and so much trees or whatever, but look at the big landscapes that decide, together with the government, decide which area should be reforested. I'm thinking now mainly about West Africa, where this could at least be possible to do. And then, of course, education, financing for the whole community will help them to get to a better situation. Improve the traceability, monitoring, third party. I think this is quite evident. And also think about the human rights questions, because all these questions are interlinked. Deforestation, human rights, child labor, farmer income, biodiversity, climate, everything is interlinked. And then from company point of view, I think we have opportunity to educate our consumers, and we should talk about what we are doing, not giving just these overarching promises or something like that, but really say what we are doing, and that will also open the eyes for the consumers to understand these pretty complex questions. I think that was basically what I have, and here just to mention that cocoa is not the only crop that we are buying that is within this regulation, but today we talked about the cocoa as maybe the most important for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaisa. Very inspirational presentation and honest also. So thank you for that. We have a couple of questions. So first one, I don't know, maybe this could be for Anke or Viktor or anybody else who wants to answer. Is there any threshold which triggers the EUDR obligations if the sourced volume spend is very low?
So maybe I can comment, I think, yes, or maybe Anke, yeah. To my understanding, it's more about the transition periods in terms of what are the size of the companies in which bracket you will end up. But maybe Anke or someone you want to elaborate on this. We know that we are a large company in this category.
Yeah, so two things. No, there is no threshold. The moment you are a company that would like to place things on the European market, which are, and I think that's very important to say, within the range of the EUDR. So it would be good to check whether in the appendix your products that you would like to place on the market are in. You need to fill in a due diligence statement. There's no way around this. Rightly said by Salla. if you are a small or a micro enterprise, you have until next year June to do it. And then I think I looked at a bit. There was in the chat a question about mass balance and due diligence statements. So I think maybe an advice for everybody: just have a look. I know it's boring and I know it takes a lot of time. Have a look through the FAQs of the European Commission, because quite a few things are very well explained there. With regards to mass balance, so mass balance, it's quite interesting to see how different people interpret mass balance. But mass balance, in the sense how it was used by certification systems, for example, was the possibility to mix unknown origins with known origins. This is not allowed under the EU Deforestation Regulation anymore. You need to know where your sources come from. What was in the last FAQ was the fact that, you know, a company could actually put in a bigger number of plots of land where the products could have potentially come from, so that they're sourced from. If they do this, they will, however, need to ensure that for all of these plots of land, there are no concerns with regard to deforestation or for timber products for degradation, neither for legality. I think that also needs to be kept in mind. There is a possibility to use actually due diligence statements from other organizations. So if you are something, the world is called a downstream operator, so not the one first placing the cocoa beans on the European market, to stay in that, but if you are buying the cocoa beans from somebody else, or buy the cocoa butter, which was done in the EU, then you can refer towards a due diligence statement from the company that put the cocoa beans on the market. But however, as a company, you should, the company should really control whether the data which they have gotten from that other company is trustworthy. They keep the responsibility. That is something that needs to be kept in mind there. I guess, yeah, that was it.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. And then we have question for Salla and Kaisa. Could you speak more towards how does the EUDR affect small producers' income? Has the economic effects for micro producers in your supply chain been assessed? Is it viable to be a small producer or coffee and cocoa anymore, especially with climate change challenges and family-owned farmers not continuing the difficult trade, for example, because children going to school instead? Very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tomi. Maybe I'll take the first stab and then I'll give to Kaisa. From our side, I think we continuously assess the producer base, and we, as you rightfully put, a lot of the producers are already quite aged in some of the countries, so there is already a risk of future generations for some of these producers. What EUDR does is it creates additional barrier for entry for markets. So then it might be even harder to find the buyer for those crops that they produce. So there is a risk that there is this cycle where then the farmers will do the decisions of which livelihoods they will rely on. And again, then, you know, in terms of diversity and resilience of different locations, that might cause issues. And of course, it is then a challenge if the production will even further centralize to bigger countries, which is, you know, a real unintended consequence that, you know, in the industry is looking to potentially happen. So we know that big countries where there are big plantations, they are more ready, and the governments are more ready to assess it. But I do think maybe it would be a bit too much to say that we've done an in-depth assessment of all the economic effects, but we are definitely following in this and trying to figure out how on specific locations, particularly in the Africa, we could improve the attractiveness of the trade for smallholder farmers in the future, regardless and in relation to EUDR.
Thank you. Kaisa?
Yeah, I think so too, that to be a smallholder and export your goods to Europe, you almost need, I think you need the buyer to be quite responsible and maybe from Europe, so that they can educate you what you can do or cannot do, provide you with the needed infrastructure for the plotting and the supply chain, because it's the whole supply chain all the way that has to be visible. So I heard that about 50% of the cocoa farms, at least today, would be mapped to be able to sell to Europe. So the rest 50%, are they going to sell to Europe? I'm not sure. This can lead to a situation also when those who can sell to Europe get a better price than the others. So we don't know the consequences. Time will show. But of course, the most important that we try to support our own supply chains and also talk to the governments to help out, because this is not only the buyers, but it's the whole community.
Yes, thank you. I think we all still don't know exactly how this influences both the market and the operators and then the smallholders. Of course, we hope that positively, but it might be that there is some period of time that it's a little bit uncertain. There is one question for Anke. Anke can answer also, I think, in the Q&A straight. I would like to ask one question to Kaisa and Salla, and maybe also Michael, from your perspective with the Indonesia commodities and companies, like if there would not have been this EUDR, if it didn't pass, if it didn't materialize, how would you feel that your business sectors, cacao or coffee, or then in Indonesia, would this kind of change, would it have happened without this regulation? Of course, this is only for EU, but anyways, if you think about your own sector.
No, maybe I can say first here. I think it has very good impact. We want the level playing field, definitely, because I think in Europe we are pretty responsible companies, many of us, and we want to then either the bad players to leave the market or then upgrade to the good level. Also, this has ripple effects because many of these commodities are globally traded, so it will impact also the US. For example, because they sell to us, so then they need to also be compliant. So I think this is very welcomed. It's more the short time that makes us worry.
Yeah, not much to add from my side. I already mentioned in my presentation that actually we've seen a lot of mobilization sort of faster than what we saw in previous years. So it has been easier to get the responses that we've been asking for a long time from some of the suppliers. To be honest, we have supplier relationships where we had these discussions for a long time, but I think in terms of the speed of the tools and the mapping, this has definitely triggered a faster movement. And I think for all of us, we know that we don't actually have that much time in terms of climate emergency and of course the nature deprivation. So I think the acceleration has been definitely welcome, but like Kaisa, let's not overcomplicate it. Maybe starting with smaller steps. So from that perspective, we do have real worries for the actual industry and the unintended consequences, as we've been discussing this for a long time.
Thank you. Do you want to say
from
yes?
my side, Maija, I can mostly talk for rubber. I think EUDR shook the very foundations of the whole industry. Rubber was, in many places, still is so far behind all the other commodities in traceability and even knowing who produced the latex that they put in the tires, that EUDR was an absolute game changer.
Okay, well, that's a good, I think it also gives us this trust that we are doing the right thing and we are on the right path. Now at the moment there's no more questions. I think Anke is just about to answer this one question that there is in the Q&A still. It's regarding the if a large company buys products from a small enterprise, that does not have to do due diligence? What is the responsibility of the large company in that case? If you shortly, Anke, answer this also verbally, then we can...
Yeah, it's also not that typical because three things are coming together. A, it would depend whether you're talking about an SME trader or an SME operator. Secondly, because I was just actually drafting my thing, there is the opportunity that actually a very, very small operator can source out the requirement for due diligence to the next bigger company in the supply chain if they would do that. So the company takes the responsibility, but that is really applying with inside the EU as far as I'm aware, because it needs to be always companies placing products on the European market. And I also do think that the information requirements, so Article 9 of the EUDR is about the information that you need to figure out, that needs to be fulfilled by all companies. So no matter whether you're SME or not, you need to be clear where these come from. It's more the question about, do I need to carry out a risk assessment or not? So which would also mean that and I would need to recheck that. I'm sorry, I'm not that into it at the moment, that all of them would need to handle in a due diligence statement. It's more about the fact, do I carry out a due diligence assessment or not? The information requirement, Article 9, is a bit separate from that. But bear with me if that wasn't 100% correct.
Thank you so much. For all of you who are who feel that you need more information also about the details, so you can also I think Viktor had a good speech, and they have a lot of information that the food agency Ruokavirasto, and we had a couple of experts joining today also. You can contact them with the specific questions if you're a Finnish company or you're worried about something. They have good information and will provide more information in the months to come, definitely. And you can always contact me or WWF. I can also, if you want to discuss the deforestation risk or this EUDR, we are always ready to talk with different stakeholders. I have one poll here regarding the feedback for the seminar. Thank you very much for all the presenters, all the attendees. It was very interesting discussion, and if there is interest, we can arrange more of these webinars or even smaller discussion groups if there is need for that. But let's see if I can get this working for feedback. So you should now see a poll. Let me know if you don't see it. So there is 2 questions only. I give you 30 seconds. So about 80% thought that the webinar was useful. Thank you so much. And maybe some of you already attended a previous webinar by the ministry. So it was quite a lot of same things. And then very nicely, you would like to continue discussions with the topic, around the topic with us and other stakeholders. So let's see what we can do. Did you see the results? Yes, you can see them now. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. It's now on the hour and we are ready. And once again, sorry for the little bit inconvenience in the beginning, but we made it very well on time. Thank you and have a very nice end of the day and week.